Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm sure that you will enjoy the next session that we're doing. In the interest of time, there would be, I would only allow for 3 questions to DPM. I think DPM has shared with us his insights, his great insights on the challenges that faces Singapore, focusing instead of just the pure economic talk, but rather basing more on the social aspects, the social challenges facing Singapore in the future. And I think the important thing that DPM has pointed out is that it's pertaining to how to deal with those behavioral biases. And that involves the challenge of changing mindsets. I think that's a very critical thing as we move forward to this future. So let me just open it to the floor now for questions for DPM. Please identify yourself.
Yu Kwang from NTU. A very informative and sensible talk. Thank you. Just 2 quick points. First, I strongly support your point about allowing people to work and contribute for as long as they can. As I am currently working full-time at the age of 74. Second quick point. You mentioned the CPF in Singapore has been doing better at 5-6% compared to 3-4% Hong Kong, US, and so on. But I think you understate the better performance of Singapore, because what you quoted were the nominal returns. In terms of real returns, Singapore is doing even better, because over the last few decades, Singapore's rate of inflation has been lower than those countries. Especially, you mentioned that Australia was doing better at something like 6%. But Australian inflation has been much higher. So after you take the real terms, Singapore is doing better even than Australia. Thank you.
By the way, for those of you who are not familiar, Professor Ng Yu Kwang is one of the most outstanding economists in the region, because he's what you call a welfare economist. And he was a rarity in his time, because he published in the American Economic Review and other top journals in the field of welfare economics when he was based in Australia. So we are happy that higher inflation rates have brought you here to Singapore. And I think you made a useful point. I should just clarify, by the way, that when I mentioned 5 to 6%, I was referring to the combination of your CPF together with workfare and the grant that we provide for housing in your CPF accounts. It is true that the CPF on its own has also performed better than the Hong Kong MPF over the last 15 years. But I think the emphasis of my speech was that the CPF system has to be viewed together with the infusions of monies from the government budget that enter into individuals' accounts in the CPF each year. That combination is really our social security system.
Dr. David Lee.
Deputy Prime Minister. David Lee, Vice President of Economic Society of Singapore. Thank you very much for a very in-depth and informative speech. Tasked by my president to ask the question.
I'm sure you're more than capable to have thought of it on your own.
I also have a behavioral bias
towards
technology. So my question has nothing to do with CPF, but instead of one question, I have 2. In China, besides the One Belt, One Road policy, the government and private sector are working on the Internet Plus policy with WeChat, Alipay, and electronic renminbi using blockchain. The 3 Ma's, Ma Mingzhe of Ping An Insurance, Pony Ma of Tencent, and Jack Ma of Alibaba formed the Zhong'an Insurance Companies way back in 2013. They have not only succeeded in disrupting the banks, insurance companies, credit rating agencies, and supply chain financing, but have also begun to have their presence felt in ASEAN and beyond. Now, Jack Ma has also accepted Indonesia's invitation to be e-commerce advisor. The Chinese are good in scaling and serving people in very remote areas and expanding their businesses in ASEAN. So to most people, technology is about disruption of brick and mortar businesses. It is about displacing existing jobs. It is about confrontation with policymakers. It is about causing chaos in a well-behaved society. It is about getting rid of centralized control. But to China, it is an Internet Plus policy. So my questions are, first, with the growth of the likes of WeChat, ZhongAn, and Ant Financial, and other scalable technology companies, how can we change the mindset of our people so that we can also embrace digital openness, inclusiveness, decentralization, fewer regulation, and especially China's Internet Plus way of doing business? And the second question is, how do we take advantage of Chinese One Belt, One Road policy and their technology to grow Singapore economy and ASEAN and maybe our pension returns? Thank you.
Sorry, what was your second question?
I'm sorry the question is so long, yeah.
No, I
How
was
do we take
distracted.
advantage of the Chinese One Belt, One Road policy?
No, that was your first question, right? I'm talking
That's
about
the
your second question.
Second.
That's the second one. That's it. The
Second-
first question is that how
No, don't
can
repeat your
we-
first question, sorry.
How can we change the
I just wanted
mindset?
your second question.
How can we change the mindset of our people
Yeah,
to
correct, I got
embrace
that. So what's the second
technology
question?
and
Is One Belt, One Road, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so on your first question, I'll just say very briefly that China is one of the most impressive examples of innovation in payments. They are way ahead in Asia. I would say India is now leapfrogging in some respects in the payment space, digital payments. But China is also an example of the risks that come about from unregulated lending and borrowing, which has also been using the internet and the digital space. It is now well recognized that P2P or peer-to-peer lending is going to lead to significant losses on the part of lenders. A lot of the asset management business that was also internet-based is going to lead to many investors coming to grief. So we've got to look at China for its positives, but be aware of the negatives. And the great positive is that companies that were based not in the financial services world, but who are based in the e-commerce world, in the social media world, led the charge into financial services and have revolutionized payments. There's a lot to be learned from that. Studying the technologies, the gentleman who's sitting on your right, by the way, is in charge of this at the MAS. And we are catching up compared to the position the Chinese in, but we want to do this in a way that's sustainable and doesn't threaten the credibility and trust in our financial system as a whole. That's a very precious asset, credibility and trust. So some of the excesses in the Chinese system as a result of internet or internet plus innovations have to be avoided. On your second point about One Belt, One Road, it's a very large question. I don't want to take up the time of the audience now. I'll just say that basically it's a huge opportunity within Asia. It's not just for China, but it will spur a lot of intra-Asian trade and investment in the next 2 decades. A very significant scope for spurring intra-Asian trade and investment at a time when trade and investment globally is not doing as well.
Any third last question, maybe? Yeah, member of our youth wing.
Hi, DPM. Hello. Hi, DPM. Thanks for taking the time to spend it with us tonight. So I'm Gerald. I'm the youth chairperson of the ESS. I too was planted to ask a question. So, given the examples highlighted in your speech tonight, it seems that given the implications of a very drastically different macro environment, the government actually continue on a very safe and sustainable way of carrying out its operations. And I think it's in interest of all those that are young at heart. We would like to ask, with regards to engineering Singapore's future economic growth, is Singapore actually ready to experiment boldly and be prepared to stumble while actually searching for a winning formula?
So I think to a greater extent than before, yes. So we need more disruption in virtually every industry. I was speaking recently about the food services business. Likewise, when you look at logistics, when you look at a whole range of industries, I was talking about payments a short while ago, we need more disruptive models. We need new players coming in with models that upstage existing players, but we also need existing players, incumbents, to be able to cannibalize their traditional businesses with new models. It's not just because we've run out of manpower and we need to increase productivity. It's also because there's a real opportunity before us. There's an opportunity in Asia and in some areas globally for players that are willing to disrupt the world. Substantial opportunities for revenue growth and ultimately for economic gains to be earned by managers, workers, everyone up and down the line. So philosophically, we're keen on disruption.
Thank you.
Any last pressing question, which is not tasked by me?
Otherwise, I think Singapore's predominant behavioral bias awaits us.
Okay, there's a last question, DPM.
Hello. My name is Charlie Charan Wong. I'm the Director of Financial Engineering Program at Nanyang Technical University. I have a question about the longevity risk. I believe that people in Singapore that cross 50 years old most likely going to live until 100 years old. So this might be a happy problem that how Singapore government handle those that is old, intelligent, healthy. How are we going to take care of these people?
So it's a good question. I mean, I don't know about the specific estimates, but we are already one of the 3 or 4 countries in the world with the longest lifespans, which is, I think, it's a good thing. And at the rate medical science is improving, I've no doubt in my mind that we're going to continue to live longer. For each new cohort, we can add an extra length of time to their whole lifespan. That's what's happening. And it means first that we've got to make working longer not just possible but attractive. It means the culture of our society should be one which is not ageist, but one which respects and welcomes people of different ages at the workplace. And it means basically over time that retirement is not thought of as retirement. It's not that you work and then you suddenly retire. If you look up the dictionary meaning of retire, it's inactivity, it's perhaps a treadmill, but it's not an active mind and body. The blurring between traditional work life and retired life is extremely important. We've got to blur those two concepts. You may move into new forms of work as you get older, more flexible, more part-time. But staying active is extremely important for everyone. I think it makes for better lives for ourselves individually, and it also makes for a better society.
Well, thank you, DPM. Please join me to thank DPM.